So whenever you
Ready. So speak loud.
Okay, welcome everyone to this session. This is going to be a very technical session, but it's going to be very cool. So I hope you get to enjoy it as much as we enjoyed preparing it. We're going to show you how to create plugins which are extensible by other plugins for the Liferay platform. Not for the future, but for now, for Liferay 6.2. So you're going to hear a lot about OSGi. Probably you've heard a lot about this technology lately, especially in this symposium. There are many sessions around the topic of OSGi, and this is a technology that we're going to love. Probably you haven't heard, many people haven't heard about it before, but it's actually changing completely the way to develop, and it's going to help you a lot. And it's changing completely the Liferay platform for good. And OSGi is mainly about modularity. So what OSGi is doing is allowing us to split our code in small components, very small reusable components, which define very clearly the things that you need from others and the things that you offer to other modules. And it's very simple, very straightforward, and it completely changes the way you can plan your application, you can plan your development. And it's something really, really easy. So you may be saying, okay, but Liferay already allows for modularity, right? You could have the portal, as we usually had this picture for representing Liferay, and then you have different modules that you could plug into Liferay. So you usually had portlets, you had themes, you have posts. So you already somehow have all your development modularized in small modules, right? It was not just a big module, but you will have one portlet for this feature, another portlet for this other, another for this other, and that was already some kind of modularity. Right? So if it was a shadow, you cannot see there what I mean now with Liferay, the colors. So the thing is, modules by themselves were not modular, right? So imagine you give this amazing portlet, but now you want to have more extensions for that portlet. That was not possible. So if you wanted to modularize the modules themselves, that was not possible. Liferay itself was already, you could add modules to it, but you couldn't add modules to the modules. So this is when OSGi came to play. So in Liferay 6.2, we already have OSGi, and this brings modularity of the modules, which is something really cool. Which means that instead of having just Liferay with modules that you could plug, now you can have modules which are also made out of other modules, which are much smaller, and then you can actually reduce them between different modules. And you can add a lot of functionality to your existing apps by just adding new modules. And this is something very similar to the idea of microservices. It's pretty much the same concept, which means that you can start with things which are very, very small and just reuse them everywhere. So for example, we are starting to create a lot of microservices inside of the Liferay platform that you can reuse. And they are available for 6.2 already, such as the geolocation service or many others that they are very tiny. They just do one very small thing, but they do it well. And then you can just create an application only consuming other existing services, for example. And these services actually can go into the marketplace starting this Wednesday. This is something we didn't have in the marketplace yet. You will upload your apps and your portlets, your hooks. And starting this Wednesday, you can also upload to the marketplace small services, OSGi modules that provide a small functionality, but that you can reuse in any other app. So we are going to see a real example today of how to do this. And Lord is going to tell you about it.
Thank you. So yes, in order to demonstrate how you can create extensible plugins, we have ourselves create one plugin that is extensible thanks to OSGi. So for our example, we have a simple cost calculator. In this case, we have some common features for all countries. For example, you will want to calculate shipping costs based on the number of items and the price of each item. But you may also want to add some specific features for each country. Meaning that for the USA or for Europe, we want different fields in our form, or we want to do a different algorithm to calculate the final price.
Choosing the selector, clicking here in the country, we'll show here fields which are specific to each country, right? So they will have different, not only amounts, but different fields, different ways of calculating the price for depending on the country.
So if you had to do this with Liferay, how could you do it? So we could do it in the old way, that is developing a plugin that is very complex and contains these specific features for as many countries as we can. And every time we add a new country, or we change the algorithm for a country, we need to release a new version our plan. Okay, and so that will be the way. Or we can do it a new way, so that our application is basically very simple. It contains only the common features. And for every country, we'll have an extension that will increase the number of countries available in our selector. And every time we want to add a new one, or we want to change how one of those extensions work, we don't need to release our application again. We only need to release a new extension or to update one of those extensions.
So the cool thing is you don't have to wait for Liferay 7 to follow this new strategy, this new paradigm of development. You can actually do it in Liferay 6.2, which is something very actually, this is the way we are completely changing and architecturing the Liferay platform for Liferay 7. So this is pretty much the future of Liferay. So if you start with it right now, you can actually come before all Liferay is built this way. But this is the way all the Liferay platform is going for the next year. So this is like a snapshot of the future. And actually, we are releasing one new app today. It's called audience targeting. It's being presented at 1 by Edchamp. And we built this application using all the OSGi framework. So it's the first application using this paradigm. It's going to be in the marketplace on Wednesday. So it's just a very simple core for audience targeting. And then it has like 40 extensions already that we have bundled into this app. And we're actually thinking of releasing more and more extensions in the marketplace for adding more functionality into this app. So it's again like a cool app we can release in the marketplace. And we will be releasing a ton of extensions in the marketplace, which are like small apps which are more functionality to this existing app. And this is the same thing I'm going to do today in this example to show you how you can leverage OSGi to create apps and extensions, and then you can create more extensions and you can also deliver to the marketplace, for example. And this new paradigm, it has a lot of advantages that we wanted to tell you. For example, maintainability is much easier to maintain several small modules than maintain one big module. Because everything is, if you have well-defined what the interfaces are and with your contract, it's much easier to know if there is a problem where it is, because this should return this and it's not returning it. So the problems are usually very close. It also maximizes reusability. The components are very small. You can reuse them pretty much everywhere. So it's easier to reuse things in many parts of your applications. Also, it simplifies a lot the releases. I will go later into that. And it provides new market opportunities because now you can release and distribute those small services in your marketplace, and you can come up with new things that you don't have to build a whole application to deliver that in the marketplace. You can actually sell in the marketplace extension points or microservices that others can use to build their applications. So talking about releases, this is something that usually happens when you have a product. We have a number of features in this case, and you have the time. So over time, the more features you add, your product becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and then releases become more and more complex. So every new release you try to do, it has a higher degree of complexity. However, if you follow this approach of microservices or the small modules, then your core remains pretty much stable by time. You don't need to make as many releases, so you can release in a more separated period of time. And then the core itself is almost the same amount of code because it's simple. And you're adding more and more features just by adding more and more extensions that are very small and very simple to test and release. So that way you can be providing more and more features to your app, just adding new extensions to the marketplace or working in small changes in those small extensions, which means the release process is much easier and much more stable. So this is what we are trying to achieve with Liferay 7 for the platform, so that our core is much more stable and we can just keep frequently releasing all the modules we want, but keeping the core stable and not changing it so frequently.
Okay, so you may think this sounds really good, but you don't have any idea how it was. No problem, because today we are going to show you all you need to know to create also the application that are extensible. So all you need to know I would love to know about OSGi. We're going to show you what you need to start creating extensible application. So today, through this practical example, through the shipping cost calculator, we're going to show you how to create your own OSGi plugins with the Liferay SDK. We're going to show you how to make them extensible, and we're going to show you how to create OSGi extensions for your application. So let's have a look at to our core application. Remember, for our shipping cost calculator, we have two parts. We have the common features and what we call extensions that support for new countries. So let's see what we have so far. This is our shipping cost calculator with the main functionality. We only have the function to obtain the price based on the item, on the quantity of items, and the price for each item. But we want to add support so that we can add specific information for different countries. So if you are delivering, for example, to the US, you want to add some fields to obtain the taxes. If you are shipping to the Europe, you want to add other options. So how can we do that? So in those extensions, all the shipping extensions, and we need extensions inside. Okay, so we need, for example, in this case, we will create an extension for the USA and an extension for Europe. What is a service? In this case, the term service is not probably what you are used to in Liferay. We're not talking about entities in our table, but we're using about a more abstract concept that OSGi created, an OSGi service, and it's composed by two components. An API, which is basically an interface with service. So let's see how we do it. So this is our API or the interface for the shipping extension. Okay, basically, the shipping extension just have to provide a result of calculating shipping cost. It extends the very simple algorithm of multiplier items by price, which has more complexity. It also has a currency. It provides some extensions to our shipping cost formula. Provides a name, and entity. Okay, this is the interface or contract that any extension must fulfill. And let's see how an implementation looks like. Can you make it? Well, this basically what we have done is to add some code to the methods, but notice please the annotation that we have at the top of the page. How can we make, once we have implemented shipping code, how can we make the OSGi service container aware that this is a shipping code extension? So the component annotation, what we're doing is, okay, this is a service, an implementation of a shipping extension service, and we want it to be available immediately so that any other application can consume this service. Okay, and all this is done through this annotation. So now that we have the extensions, we need a registry to store all those extensions. Okay, so in this case, how once the service has been added to the service container, how can we obtain a list with all the available services of the type shipping extension? Well, in this case, we don't need to perform any kind of search, but every time a service of the type shipping extension is deployed into my container, this method will be invoked, and I can use it to store a reference of that service in a registry. This is a map. I will be able to use this map from my web interface to create my selector of shipping extensions. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is to reference to that service, and we may have multiple instances of the same service, multiple extensions of my shipping codes, and we also want to be aware of where my extension is undeployed. So I remove it from my list. That's why we understand that when the service is undeployed, we want to unregister from our registry. Okay.
So now what I'm going to show you, we have developed two extensions. So we are just going to, they are different jar files that you could actually distribute in a marketplace or anywhere. So you just need to, for example, state the USA, let's drop it into the deploy folder for our application. Okay, it's being consumed right now. Okay, so right now. So right now you can see, as soon as we deploy that, here we have the USA 6.2, we have this country, and the specific fields we have destination.
Yeah. So well, the good thing here is that you can extend your application in the way you want. So you can add new fields to the form, or you can extend the algorithm to calculate the final cost. So you don't only take into account the item quantity or the price, but you can, for example, define specific taxes for that extension.
So I'm going to deploy the European extension also. This is also a very small jar file. And you can see now here, both modules. You change Europe, the whole thing is different. We have conversion rate or discount code. So as you see, not only the behavior is different, but also the whole UI, the way it works in the background is completely different. You have different behaviors, and you can now also deploy these modules. You can just install them, and you don't have that extension anymore in the UI. So the UI is completely changed dynamically based on the services we have for this registration CPQ cost.
We have seen how to access the available OSGi services from a component with a reference annotation. But what happens with orders that are not implemented, that are not instantiated by the OSGi container? We have, so how do we connect the library world with the OSGi world? So we can, from a library world, how can we search OSGi services? There is an utility class, service TrackerUtil, that allows us to search services that implement specific instances. With this, this is the way we have populated our select list in the library board. We have used the service TrackerUtil to say, okay, give me any implementation of the interface that is currently available in the OSGi container. I get a list that is actually unregistered, as we've shown you before, and through that dynamic list, I can build my UI dynamically. Okay, so as Julio has shown, every time we deploy a new rule of the type super extension, it is registered, and we are automatically aware of that new implementation is available, and we display it without any restart. Okay. So
one specific thing about OSGi, which makes a module to be an OSGi module, is that they have a BMD file, which is very similar to a manifest file. I can show you some of those. And this is a file in which you declare some metadata, such as the name of the module, the version, and then the most important part is that you define which APIs you are exporting to other modules, so you make them available to other modules, and which APIs you are importing from other modules. And then the OSGi container handles all those dependencies. You don't have to worry about libraries, jar files, or anything. So you just need to declare in your module what you are exporting and what you are importing, and everywhere else stays completely private for your module. So I can show you, for example, in the CPU extension. So for one of the stations, one of the extensions, for the API, for example, we have this BMD file. You can see it's very small, we just have the name and some metadata. And then the most important part is the export here. So this module is exporting these two packages in which we have all the interfaces we are using. So since this is the API, we are exporting those models so that other models can use them. And then, for example, in one of the implementations, we only need to import those, and we don't need to export anything because our model doesn't export anything to the outside world. So if we look at any other, for example, in this one, we only have import packets, and we don't need to export anything. So that's the way you keep your modules very simple, in a way that they are very closed, so that you're defining what this model uses from the others and what the others use from it. So you don't need to do anything crazy with copying jar files to other places or something that, as we have been doing in the past with the library services, it was very complex to keep all the work between different class loaders used to get very, very nasty. So with this OSGi container, they're completely isolated from all the class loaders, magic, and problems. So we need to define the things you need from others, the things allow others to use, and that's all. So it's very simple.
This will also help you to keep dependencies under control. So of course, you don't want your implementations to be added to the container if the API is not available. So that means that through these BMPs, what we are telling OSGi is that you shouldn't make this implementation available until the API itself is available, because the implementation depends on the API.
And you may be wondering, well, do I have now to define all the packages from everywhere that I'm using here in this file, because I can get really big too. So the truth is, there is a tool when you're submitting Liferay, when you deploy your product, it automatically scans all your Java files and generates this file for you. So you don't really need to worry, unless you're using another technologies such as FreeMarket or DSPs, in which you cannot scan those dependencies yet. We may do it for certain, we are not there yet. And then those you need to add them manually, but otherwise, if you're using Java classes, all the import files for those packages are automatically added to their imports that you need. You just need to make sure to define properly your exports if you want everybody else to be able to access from your module. So, as you've seen, we have created an application that can be extended with new extensions. But in our own sample, we have gone even farther with our modularity. And the core application is being implemented with modules. So we have a module with the shipping API that contains only the interfaces. We have the shipping implementation that implements the common features. This is the calculator. And we also have our UI separated in a different modules. The advantage of this approach is that I cannot only extend or modify the behavior of my application with new extensions, but I can replace these modules without touching the others if I want to change the way my core application behaves. So if, for example, I want to change the common features, the way we calculate basically with the amount of items and the price of items, I can modify, I can change or replace the shipping implementation without changing the other modules. And even if I have one implementation and I deploy another with higher priority, that will replace the one I'm using. So that means that I can extend my application from the outside and also from the inside. And the good thing, as I always say, is that you can have multiple versions of each of your modules with a different ranking, and then the server will usually give you the latest version, so you can easily add new modules with override. For example, in this implementation, we have like 5 different OSGi services, so you can create a new module which just provides one of those with a higher ranking, and then you're automatically overriding that one. And then through your app, when you request one service, the OSGi container gives you usually the latest one, but you could also ask for a specific version that you know for whatever reason. So this opens a whole new world of opportunities also about versioning, about having different versions of your app at the same time, or using different services, just everything but deployable and very easy, with no tricks or extension environments, everything just very simple, out of the box, standard OSGi. So this is all. Thank you very much for coming. For more information, we are launching today another talk, the new Liferay developer website. So in this one, there will be a lot of information about creating OSGi modules. We'll have several tutorials here. And these talks, the microservices, the OSGi way, is a much more deep approach about all the OSGi technology by Miguel Pastor later today. And then I'm doing also a workshop about the audience targeting, the app I told you before that will be in the marketplace on Wednesday, in which we are using OSGi to create extensions for this app. So we're having a workshop for creating some of those extensions, like OSGi extensions for an existing OSGi app. So any of those, you're going to have more questions, also feel free to come or ask us. So thank you very much, and we're open to your questions as well. How much time do we have?
4 minutes plus.
Great, okay.
4 minutes. Yeah. Can you talk about the container? So using another open source product, or you can build your own?
No, what we did in Liferay is to implement the OSGi specification. It basically defines a container of services. That means that this is like a list of available services of all types, like shipping extensions or geocode service or printer. Okay, those are all registered. So Liferay integrates one of those OSGi containers so that you can deploy not only portlets, but you can deploy new services. So when we talk about this container, is that Liferay now includes one of those OSGi containers. So you can deploy new services, new OSGi services in Liferay that can be consumed through this service tracker from Liferay portlets.
So actually, I think we just changed for Liferay 7 the container. I think we were using the Eclipse one, and now we changed to the Felix implementation. I'm not fully sure about that one, but Miguel knows. That one we can actually check. So for 6.2 there is one container, and for 7 there is another, but both of them are medium implemented. They are the standard one. Apache and Prometheus.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the coolest thing about OSGi is that it actually abstracts you from the application server. So all the interdependencies are done by the OSGi container and not by the application server anymore. And again, for the sake for deploying apps, we don't need to go through all the deployment process in the different application servers. So one of the coolest features of OSGi is that it gives us like a layer on top of the application servers. So we don't really need to worry about any other application server anymore. So we've been actually testing the audience tagging app, for example, this last week before release. So it's been working perfectly in IBM WebSphere, in Tomcat, GlassFish, and JBoss. So all those already support the OSGi container, so that's already supported in 6.2 for all the application servers. Yeah, sure. We will publish the presentation at the Liferay Symposium website, I think this week, right after the symposium is done. And we'll also mention it in our Twitter account. So if you want to follow up, we will make sure to say, hey, here is the presentation for the slides. Yeah, the example is already available. We have it here. So here is the URL for the example. Right now it's in GitHub. We'll probably move into a samples page and a tutorial page in the Liferay website. But at this point, it's in our GitHub.
Yeah, it's in my own personal repository, but that's why we haven't sent it to you, because we are planning to move it to a repository we have for samples. This is the last repository, and we will probably write a new an article with all that we have explained today in the new Liferay development site. Okay, so you will find it there with a link to the final repository of our example with all the explanation you need to make this example work and to create your own accessible plugins with OSGi. I have time for a couple of questions.
I started to investigate OSGi a few weeks ago. As far as I know, I realized that we need a different plugin SDK for Liferay 6.2 in order to develop OSGi plugins instead of just the one that you download as a zip file.
In Liferay 6.2, the existing plugins SDK works with OSGi, but in a very simple way. If you want to do user service builder and more complex things, you need to update your plugins SDK. And it's also in GitHub. It's not to the URL. Just in Liferay plugins, you need to download the branch 6.2x. And it has all the.
So it must be provided as a zip file.
Well, we've actually provided it for the audience tagging in the USB there, but I'm not sure we are releasing a new one. Maybe we should probably do it. I will write that. We probably release a new plugin SDK for support with OSGi.
Okay. The last question we have.
Is there a way that we can run the services in different way, like reducing the PC quality for the portal and offloading the
I think there is something for that, and I actually think Miguel is talking about it in his talk, in the microservices one. Because there is a standard in OSGi exactly for doing that. There's a standard which is really supported. So in the talk by Miguel, the microservices one, he's talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.